Once in a million years, an anime so revolutionary graces our mortal eyes. Unparalleled artistic and writing genius on every quantifiable spectrum. The masterpiece I am referring to is none other than Redo of Healer, of course. Most people would not be able to understand the inner machinations of the show's moving parts to the extent that a man on the quadrillionaire grind set like myself may know. For those not on the grind set, I have prepared a short presentation. Let's look at one of my favorite scenes from Redo of Healer. After a long night of intense coitus, Sigma male Keiaru embarks to get sweet revenge on some men. To viewers, it is not clear why he is on this warpath, but as the next events unfold, it will be clear and critical to the future plot. To open this scene, Keiaru reveals his strategy. He intelligently poses the idea of using an aphrodisiac, but it is unclear as to what he means by that. I tried my best to understand the complex thought process of Keiaru, but I simply fell flat. I could not even fathom what he intended to do with the aphrodisiac, probably because his actual plan was far too advanced for my puny mind, but my working theories are as follows. Typically, aphrodisiac is used as a method of seduction or baseless attraction. Previously, he used it on Kureha to win her over and have sexual relations with her, but in this situation, he is using it as a form of revenge. So the possibility to me arises that he might use the aphrodisiac on Setsuna to seduce the men with her body. Seems like a great plan until you realize that Keiaru would not be so foolish to let anyone touch his property like that. She is his sole object and his alone. So of course the possibility of this reality cannot happen. The next possibility is using the aphrodisiac on himself, which in turn would have the men seduced by him. This is a plausible reality because if we remember, Keiaru actually went through the trouble to get physically abused by a number of men and women again when he went back in time to get his grand revenge. So you know that on some level he enjoys all forms of sexual encounters and is very welcome to the possibility of male companionship. But the only counter-argument to this is that these men in particular would probably not be interested in a sexual relationship with Keiaru because of course he is a random individual in the night. Another plan would be to use the aphrodisiac on the men and then sexually toy with them himself. But the flaw in that plan would be that they would enjoy the sexual intercourse instead of suffering, which is ultimately a major part of Keiaru's point in getting revenge. So what exactly does Keiaru have planned for this aphrodisiac? Well, with a stroke of pure genius, Keiaru decides to use it on the nearby Ironhead cow. Of course! The Mad Cow Gang owns a cow! A simple mind like myself would never even fathom such an idea. But for Keiaru, these things come naturally. For those of you at home that do not have a PhD in being smart, this would imply that Keiaru intends to actually toy with these men before delivering a more ultimate fate. Just absolutely brilliant. It actually thickens the tensions between the two, leaving the audience wondering how they will retaliate after having been penetrated by such a large animal. They will probably be very angry at the very least. More likely, they will be wondering why their Ironhead cow is on a sexual rampage. This just goes to show you that these men Keiaru is dealing with obviously don't care about the needs of their companions, especially the hardest working one. Knowing these bandits, they probably commit heinous crimes like rape and pillage of village women and children. So he is opening their eyes to a problem in their camp, which is that their cow is sexually frustrated seeing all these bandits having fun while only he gets to watch, and Keiaru, through his omniscient eyes, only nudge the cow in the right direction. So when the cow is given the aphrodisiac, it makes a playful effort to approach the men about its sexual needs. Of course, because these bandits are probably bigoted towards cows, the receiving men make an effort to reject the cow. But, like Keiaru, the cow takes what it wants, and instead has its way with the men. This is actually a metaphor for Keiaru's primal sexual instincts. Throughout the series, this has been clear, but this episode in particular poses Keiaru as an actual idea of a wild animal fighting against his opponents through rage and sexual intercourse. The message here is incredibly tough to grasp for amateur viewers, but to the select few, this metaphor is completely visible and allows the image of Keiaru to grow even further than it has. He is a force of nature, and to repel nature is against all that is natural. This scene of the cow finishing is actually foreshadowing Keiaru's own future as well. Because although he has defeated his enemy and fulfilled his desires, more enemies always appear to stop him from fulfilling his destiny. An infinite repetition of being shunned by society for doing the right thing, which is defeating a corrupt capitalist monarchy that feeds off the innocent and disadvantages people all across the country. Seeing that his initial plan has completed, he moves right into phase 2, which is prefaced by the quote, "Oh no, are you going to do away with your beloved pet? That's so horrible. Do they have no blood and tears?" Seeing himself in that cow, he poses the idea that he is the only humanistic figure in the world and the rest of the world around him is unsympathetic and cruel. Hence the line, "Do they have no blood and tears?" To save the cow from these misguided heathens, he shows no mercy. Their lack of empathy should be met with equal repentance. In Keiaru's morality, dire acts of violence, mental destruction, and sexual revenge are all ethically sound because to him, punishing injustice knows no form of absolute fairness. We see this in almost every episode. He finds a new target to either kill or make his slave, and only after at least one of those is completed, wrongs have been officially righted. There are of course exceptions to his own cruelty, and even he recognizes this. In several scenes, he becomes incredibly defensive over his companions, who previously felt disposable and replaceable. And to be fair, this is true. Any single one of them could be easily replaced through simple means of his heal ability changing the appearance and memories of anyone he may find. But even so, the writers want to show the viewer that Keiaru truly is the most human out of everyone in the show, as none else care to shelter or treat their companions with respect like Keiaru, which is why when he tells Setsuna to kill these men indiscriminately, she holds no resentment of the action. Setsuna, who is at this point technically a slave, knows of the good intentions in Keiaru's heart and wants to fulfill his goals as a companion and break the mold of her character, leading the audience to believe she isn't your typical slave. Of course, to reaffirm that idea, Keiaru gives Setsuna a compliment on her skills, which also shows audiences that Keiaru has indeed been paying attention to Setsuna's combat abilities and is able to discern whether she has genuinely improved. To most people, they would assume that this is just a friendly gesture, but to Keiaru it goes much deeper. This is subtle hinting to what he intends to do with her later. Because as we learn in Setsuna's introduction, she initially agrees to mate with him to improve her abilities and skills because of the power of the hero's sperm. For the attentive viewer, you can see how her power scales up slightly every time they have coitus. In most companion-based relationships, it would be considered sexual harassment to imply you want to have sex based on a single compliment. But since Keiaru retains both the everlasting trust and attraction of Setsuna, he can simply suggest the topic and it will not even cross her mind to say no. But if you really want to break down the motivations of Keiaru, he is actually posing a test of loyalty to Setsuna. Ever since he met her, he has been manipulating and using her for his own goals. But the possibility of her betraying him cannot be cleared unless she proves and constantly reaffirms that she will have sexual intercourse at any given moment. For some men, that is incredibly misogynistic and inappropriate, but in Keiaru's mind, this is the only quantifiable measurement of loyalty. How can he really trust someone if they do not do the horizontal monkey dance on command? As we will come to see later, this exact idea will come to fruition. But for now, we go back to the cow metaphor. Keiaru and Setsuna dig a giant hole to put the cow and two of the men. This is what Keiaru sees as an act of God. He is claiming those men's lives as forfeit and therefore doing what he sees fit with their fragile lives. Consider for a second that at no point in the show, Keiaru has never been at a point of pure defeat and disadvantage, which paints him as pretty much an indisputable god. He looks down on misguided plebeians and exacts divine vengeance for heinous crimes, and in the process grants a martyr, in this case the cow, to kickstart their own lustful rampage against these men. It's quite artful when you think about it, especially how he even gives the strugglers a chance to repel such omnipotence by offering some trivial hope for them. Hoping Keiaru might spare them or offer some consolation, the men try to bargain. But knowing Keiaru, such a pitiful action would never sway him to spare them, especially not for an act as horrible as these men committed. Everything in this episode has been leading up to this big reveal as to why Keiaru has decided to attack and kill these men. So the ultimate truth comes out.
うまい料理を出す酒場を襲ったお前たちは食べ物のありがたさをそこで学ぶといい。
That's right. Keiaru had an ironhead cow sexually assault and permanently damage their anuses, then had Setsuna kill a man indiscriminately, and finally left the other two men for dead with the same cow, all because they attacked a pub with good food. An absolutely world-shattering and brilliant writing callback to a moment most viewers would classify as petty or ridiculous. But for those who actually care about the complexity of their entertainment, this moment forever changes the way one can look at their world and even their life. Keiaru finally accomplishes his goal of avenging the food, which is possibly one of the greatest reveals of all time, especially how it felt so tense watching everything build up into an epic catharsis. To finalize this scene, Keiaru lets out a maniacal laugh as a display of his amusement, and you really have to give props to the voice actor for this scene, because such a laugh cannot be faked or replicated. It had to come from one's deepest nefarious ambitions. Truly unbelievable talent. And of course, it would not be a proper redo of Healer episode without the prospect of coitus on the table, so they do just that. And just like that, I have analyzed the greatest scene and show in anime history. I hope you have properly understood why Redo of Healer is simply a modern masterpiece. Thanks for watching.